Hello, my name is Haikal Taki Heriwijaya.
My name is Andika Syafir Utama.
And my name is Alisa Yordan Tuan.
Hello everyone,
Hi.
welcome back to another episode of our academic podcast series. I am Haikal and I will be your host for today. Today we are going to explore a topic that constantly sparks intense debates across campus boardroom meetings and student corridors worldwide. The core question is, should smoking be permitted anywhere within the university grounds, or should we implement a total ban? To unpack this multi-layered issue from both academic and practical angles, I am joined today by two my brilliant classmates, Jordan and Andika. Welcome to the show, guys. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me, Haikal. I'm doing great and I'm really looking forward to this discussion because it directly affects our daily comfort and respiratory health every time we walk to class.
Hello, Haikal and Jordan. Glad to be here. I think discuss is highly timely, especially since university today are struggling to find the middle ground between strict rules and actual student behavior.
Well said, Andika. Let's immediately dive into the heavy side of the argument. There is a very strong global pressure pushing educational institutions to become 100% tobacco-free environments. Jordan, as someone who heavily advocates for public health and student welfare, could you explain the primary scientific and academic reasons why a total unconditional ban on campus smoking is considered necessary?
Absolutely, Haikal. When we talk about banning smoking on campus, the core argument isn't just about the bad smell. It is fundamentally about public health and protecting innocence by standards from secondhand smoke. Non-smoking, non-smoking students should not be forced to inhale toxic chemicals while trying to get an education. If we look at the pirouette data, prominent study by Jones, 2019, published in the Journal of American College Health, investigate outdoor campus area. They discovered that even in open air set levels that pose significant cardiovascular and acute respiratory risks to non-smoking students. The authors strongly agree that 100 percent smoke-free policy in the only definitive way to eliminate this involuntary medical risks, fulfilling the university ethical duty to promote a safe learning environment.
Okay, that is a very completing point, Jordan. The data clearly shows that open air doesn't completely dilute the health hazards for non-smokers. However, Andika, I know you look at this problem through a more pragmatic lens regarding student habits and the difficulty of enforcing such an absolute ban. What is your perspective on this?
Mm, I completely understand and respect the medical data that Jordan just mentioned. No one can deny that smoking is harmful. However, as communication students, we also have to analyze human behavior and the psychology realities on the ground. University life is highly stressful, according to comprehensive study by Hassandra et al. 2021. In the International Journal of Environment Research and Public Health, a large percent of university students utilize nicotine consumption as primary psychology coping mechanism to cope with extreme academic workloads. exam anxiety, and personal stress. If the campus suddenly enforce a total absolutely ban, uh, it won't magically cure nicotine addiction overnight. Instead, it creates a dangerous counter effect. Students will just smoke in gates, discuss severe littering problems, blocks public pathway, and harms the university relationship with the surrounding community. Therefore, I believe establishing isolated, strictly regulated, designed smoking zones away from main walkways is a much more realistic and balanced compromise.
Okay, this is turning into a fascinating debate. Jordan emphasized the absolute right to clean air, while Andika highlights the practical failures and behavioral prospect of a total ban. Jordan, how do you respond to Andika's suggestions? Can designated smoking areas actually solve the problem, or do they just create a legal loophole?
That's a highly reasonable question. Haikal, while Anika point about student stress in completely valid. The empirical evidence shows that partial bans or designated zones simply do not work in the long run. If we examine a landmark study by Braverman in 2015 in nicotine and tobacco research, they analyzed compliance rates on various campuses, monitor and smoke inevitably drift into smoke free zones anyway. On the other hand, university and that enforce an absolutely 100% smoke free policy reported significant cleaner facilities, massive reduction in cigarette litter, and a far more professional academic atmosphere. For more importantly, it's successful the normalized smoking when younger students don't see smoking as a normal campus activity, and they are statistically far less likely to adopt the habit in the first place.
Okay, so according to the data, visibility change social norms. Andika, do you have a brief counter response to that? How can we support students who smoke if a total ban is eventually implemented?
Well, if the university insists on a total ban to change social norms, it cannot just be a top down punishment. The university must actively provide support infrastructures such as free smoking, case session, counseling, stress management workshop, and healthier alternative facilities on campus. Without this sporting system, a total ban is purely punitive, and students will continue to break the rules of pure necessity.
Brilliant, excellent points from the both sides. The discussion beautifully demonstrates that the issue of smoking on campus isn't just black and white. It requires balancing collective public health, individual student psychology, and realistic institutional enforcement. Thank you so much, Jordan and Indika, for sharing your critical and academic insights today.
It was a pleasure, Michael. Thank you for opening this great dialogue.
Glad to contribute, Haikal. It was wonderful debate.
And to all our viewers, thank you for tuning in. Stay critical, stay healthy, and we will see you in our next podcast episode. Bye bye. Come back to our academic podcast channel. I'm Jordan, and I will be your host for the second segment. Today, we're tackling a massive modern revolution in higher education that has sparked intense global debate: the integration and usage of artificial intelligence or AI on campus. The central question we want to answer is, should AI be permitted in student academic activities?
To break this down, I'm joined by two insightful panel speakers, Andika and Haika. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Jordan.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. It's great to switch roles and be a guest speaker this time. This topic is incredibly relevant because AI is no longer a technology of the future. It is reshaping our study habits right now. Uh, Target.
Okay, before. Hello, Jordan.
Hello.
Hello, Haikal.
Hello.
Glad to be here. This is a very critical discussion for us public relation and communication students, as it challenges the core ethics of how we produce information.
Exactly. Apa tadi gue ya? Ulang.
Let's look.
Exactly. Let's look at the optimistic side first. Haikal, as someone who strongly embraces technological innovation in digital communication, what are the primary academic advantages of allowing students to use AI tools like ChatGPT or automated research assistants?
Okay, well, Jordan, the most profound advance of AI is in higher education is its capacity to act as an advanced catalyst for personalized learning. AI bridge the gap when traditional classroom hours are limited. If we examine the peer review literature, a comprehensive study by Zawadi Editor et al. 2019 in the International Journal of Educational Technology in Higher Education systematically review AI applications. They found that AI-driven educational software provides students with highly customized formative feedback and as an adaptive to 24-hour virtual tutor and help learners synthesize complex theoretical concepts at their own unique pace. It essentially customizes education, allowing students who might be struggling to catch up through interactive, self-paced academic support.
That's great. That's great. Having a personalized tutor available at any hours is definitely a huge advantage. However, Andika, I know you have serious reservation about how the technology impacts our actual cognitive skill and independent thought. What are the main disadvantages and risks of AI integration on campus?
I completely recognize the confidence that Haikal described, but we cannot ignore the deep intellectual risk. The primary danger here is the rapid erosion of critical thinking and the escalation of academic dishonesty. A study published by Sullivan et al. 2023 heavily warns that an over-reliance on generative AI tools severely dismiss student capacity for independent writing, logical analysis, and structural problem solving. If students rely on AI to write their essays, generate their research outlines, or summarize their books, they completely bypass the cognitive struggle that is absolutely essential for true deep learning. Furthermore, there is the massive risk AI hallucination where generative tools fabricate false data, statistics, and fake academic citation, directly compromising the core foundation of academic integrity.
Wow, so it can actually weaken our natural intelligence if we let the software do all heavy lifting. Haikal, how do you respond to Anika concern about critical thinking? Can we find a middle ground where AI doesn't ruin academic integrity?
Okay, Andika's point is completely valid, Jordan, but a blanket ban is simply unrealistic because technology can't be undone. Instead of banning it, universities must establish robust AI literacy frameworks, as argued by Selwyn 2020 in his book on digital education. The solution is to shift the educational paradigm. We need to explicitly teach students how to use AI exactly as a brainstorming, copilot, or structural editor rather than a substitute for original truth. This means professors also need to update their assessment methods, moving away from simple take-home essays and focusing more on oral presentations, live debates, and interactive role plays where I cannot think for the student.
Hmm. I agree with Haikal that shifting to assessment and interactive project is a great step forward. If the university actively adapts in evolution systems, then AI can remain a helpful tool without destroying our analysis minds.
Excellent conclusion from both of you guys. AI is an incredibly powerful tool, but human accountability, ethics, and intelligence must always remain at the center of higher education. Thank you, Haikal and Andika, for this highly academic discussion.
Thank you, Jordan, and thank you, Anika.
It was a great debate, Jordan. Thank you, Haikal and Jordan.
And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Stay analytical, use technology wisely, and we will see you in our next segment. Goodbye. Thank you.
Welcome back to our economics panel segment on our academic podcast series. I'm Andika and I will be stepping in as your host for these third topics. Today we are shifting our focus to a powerful macroeconomic issue that triggers several ripple effects across developing nations, including right here at home, the whispered impact of rising fuel price. To unpack that structural economic impact and the macro level consequence on society, I'm joined by Jordan and Haikal. Welcome to discussion, guys.
Okay, glad to be here, Andika. This is a vital topic because fuel is structurally linked to nearly every single sector of our economy.
Thank you, Andika. I'm very glad to discuss this because for inflation hits university students directly in their wallets every single day.
Absolutely, guys. Let's look at the broad economic canvas first. Whenever the government adjusts or increase fuel prices, the entire market reacts almost instantly. Jordan, can you explain the structural economic impacts of fuel prices increase, especially regarding transportation costs and inflation?
Yes, Andika. To understand full price shocks, we must look at fuel as a fundamental input cost for the entire national supply chain. When the price of petroleum rises, logistics, distribution, and manufacturing components experience an immediate surge in operational costs. If we refer to the academic literature, a landmark research paper by Kilian, uh, apa sih ini? 2008, 2008 ya.
Iya, itu salah
Sorry,
satu.
ulang.
Satu, dua, tiga, ya.
Yes, Andika. To understand full price shocks, we must look at fuel as a fundamental input across the entire national supply chain. When the price of petroleum rises, logistics, distributions, and manufacturing companies experience an immediate surge in operational costs. If we refer to the academic literature, Landmark's research paper by Kilian 2008 in the Journal of Economic Literature outlines the energy price shocks act as a direct catalyst for cost push inflation because transport companies cannot absorb these high costs permanently. They are forced to raise shipping rates and public transport fares. This inevitably creates a massive domino effect, driving up the retail market prices of everyday commodities, include raw materials, clothing, and staple food items. They will be reducing the purchasing power of the entire society.
So it is a systematic chain reaction that dismisses the value of everyone's income. Now let's bring this macro theory down to the everyday realities of ordinary people and our own demographic. Haikal, how does this economic inflation and rising transportation costs specifically alter the lives of university students and general society?
Okay, Andika, the microeconomic burden on students incredibly severe. Most students operate on very thick, fixed monthly budgets. A comprehensive study conducted by Samarai et al. 2020 closely investigate the socio-economic pressures of community price shocks on higher education students. Their empirical findings revealed that rising transport costs directly lead to an inflation of daily commuting expense for students. To survive this financial strain, students are forced to reallocate their limited money away from vital academic results. They spend less on textbooks, university research materials, and even cut back on healthy nutritious food. In serve case, the study not to prolong fuel inflation directly correlates with higher dropout rates and force students to take on exhausting part-time jobs, which drastically details their cumulative academic performance.
That is the deeply alarming, Haikal. It means fuel prices don't just affect vehicle; they directly threaten educationally equity and student well-being. Jordan, seeing this severe consequence on both macro and micro levels, what structural solution can be implemented to mitigate this harsh impact?
Well, Andika, governments cannot simply leave society to suffer the shock. There must be strategic intervention, such as implementing heavily target public transportation subsidies, especially for students and low-income workers, ensuring they don't depend entirely on costly private vehicles.
Okay, I completely agree with Joran. Additionally, from academic side, universities can adopt by introducing flexible hybrid learning models to reduce the required commuting days per week and expanding internal financial aid package or student welfare vouchers to buffer the shock of national inflation.
Brilliant. Excellent solution proposed by both of you guys. This discussion clearly highlights that fuel pricing policy requires a profound balance between state fiscal health, robust public infrastructure, and immediate social protection for the vulnerable. Thank you, Jordan and Haikal, for sharing your excellent academic arguments today. Uh,
Thank you, Anika. It was a pleasure.
Okay, thank you, Andika. A very important conversation.
And to all our viewers, thank you for watching and stay critical, manage your research wisely, and see you in our next academic podcast. Bye for now. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Anjing.